I never thought I'd hear those words out loud. Not from family, not from someone who'd held my son as a baby, smiled in pictures with him, told me he was a heartbreaker in the making. But that night, as my son handed out plastic game pieces for family game night, my Uncle Hank, loud as always, half a beer in, chewing on a toothpick like it was a cigar, leaned back in his chair and said, "That kid looks nothing like your ex, or anyone we'd claim in this family." It was like a record scratch across the room. People froze mid-sip, mid-laugh. My cousin Lana let out this dry, exaggerated chuckle and chimed in before anyone else could recover. She probably doesn't even know who the dad is. That was the moment I smiled. Just a small one. Nothing dramatic, but it was enough that they noticed, and they didn't like it. I guess they expected me to argue, to defend myself, to snap back, to call someone out, maybe even cry. That's what they were used to, drama and fireworks. But not tonight. Because this time, I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't going to raise my voice or stoop to their level. This time, my son would do the talking, and I knew they weren't ready for what he had to say. My name is Jenna Calloway. I'm a single mom, a nurse, and the so-called quiet one in the family. Not in a shy way, just the kind of person who doesn't need to broadcast every win or defend every loss. I believe in letting truth take its time. And for 10 years, I've let these people, my relatives, think whatever they wanted to think about me. My son, Wyatt, is 10. Smart, funny, incredibly kind. He's got his father's dark eyes, but my smile. He's also got this way of reading a room, knowing when things are off, when words sting more than they sound. And he's heard the whispers, the jokes, the way they glance at him when they think I'm not looking. So when he came to me 2 weeks ago and asked, "Mom, why do they think I'm not really part of the family?" I didn't lie to him. I told him the truth about his dad. The truth about the things I never said, even when I should have. And then he looked at me with those sharp, quiet eyes and said, "Can I tell them? Can I show them?" I said yes, but only when everyone was there, only when it would matter. And tonight, it mattered. We were at my parents' house like we are every second Saturday of the month. It's this family tradition: pizza, board games, awkward small talk, and thinly veiled judgments. There's Uncle Hank, my dad's brother. Loud, opinionated, thinks sarcasm is a personality. Always wears something camo and acts like every family event is a courtroom, where he's the judge and the rest of us are on trial. Lana, his daughter, my cousin, same age as me, but still acts like high school never ended. She's got this bitter edge, like she's been waiting her whole life for someone to fail just so she can feel like she's ahead. Then there's my mom, Deborah, trying to keep the peace with fake smiles and sweet tea, and my dad, Ray, who's quieter these days and more observant than people give him credit for. The room was warm with too many bodies and cheap takeout. Wyatt was setting up Connect 4 on the coffee table. Then came the comment, Hank's voice cutting through the chatter like a slap. "That kid looks nothing like your ex." And Lana, always ready to follow her dad's lead, added, "She probably doesn't even know who the dad is." The air left the room. People shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. A soda can hissed open. But I didn't say a word. I just smiled. And across the room, Wyatt looked at me. That's all he needed, just a look. He stood up, brushed his hands off on his jeans, and said with this little spark in his voice, "Mom said to wait until everyone was here." He reached into his backpack, pulled out a USB stick, and walked to the TV. "Ready?" I brought a video. And in that moment, I swear to God, every breath in that room held still. They had no idea what was coming. But I did. The thing about family traditions is they're supposed to feel comforting, familiar, like something you can count on even when the rest of your life is chaos. For a long time, family game night was that for me. We started doing it when I was a kid, every second Saturday of the month at my parents' house. Back then, it was Monopoly and popcorn and cousins sprawled across the carpet. Now it's pizza boxes, plastic wine cups, and strained conversation. It still looks like tradition on the outside. But over the years, it's become something else entirely, more like a performance. Smiles stretched thin, inside jokes used like weapons, and under-the-breath comments that hit just a little too hard. I go mostly for my parents. But tonight, Tonight, I had a reason of my own. I pulled into the driveway around 6. Wyatt was in the back seat, humming to himself, flipping through the little script we'd written together. Not a real script, just notes. What he'd say, what I'd do, what we both agreed we wouldn't tolerate anymore. "You ready?" I asked him before we got out. He nodded, serious. "You sure you are?" That's my kid. Always turning it back on me, always older than his years. I gave him a smile and squeezed his hand. "Let's do this." Inside, the house smelled like garlic knots and Febreze. My mom, Deborah, greeted us at the door with a too cheery, "Hey, baby," and kissed my cheek like she hadn't heard all the gossip from the last time I was here. She's not a bad person, just conflict avoidant, the kind of woman who decorates over discomfort. She'll repaint a whole room before she addresses a real problem. "Wyatt, honey," she called, hugging him too tightly. "Look at you, getting so big." He smiled politely, like we practiced. My mom doesn't say cruel things, not directly, but she never defends me either. We walked into the living room where the rest of the family was scattered across the sectional and folding chairs. My dad, Ray, nodded at me from his recliner. He's a man of few words, especially these days, ever since his health started slipping. But I saw the way he watched the room. He noticed everything, even if he didn't speak on it. And then there was Uncle Hank. He was in the corner, legs wide, voice louder than anyone else's, still in that battered Ohio State hoodie, nursing a beer like he owned the place. When I walked in, he barely looked up, just offered a dry evening, and went right back to whatever story he was telling. Next to him sat Lana, his daughter, tall, blonde, sharp-edged. We grew up side by side, shared a birthday month, even shared a bunk bed one summer during a family beach trip. You'd think we'd be close, but Lana has always been in competition with people who weren't racing her. "Look who decided to show up," she smirked when I sat down. "We were just placing bets on whether you'd come." I ignored her. I had bigger things to focus on. Wyatt stayed close to me, helping pass out game boards and snacks like he always does. He loves being included, even when he senses the tension. He's intuitive like that, picks up on the room. Which is probably why he glanced at me more than once, as if to ask, "Now?" But I shook my head. Not yet. We needed everyone present. We needed the tension to ripen. That sounds cold, maybe. But after 10 years of being picked apart, of sideways glances and whispered rumors, after all the times I bit my tongue when I shouldn't have, I finally realized something. Silence isn't always grace. Sometimes it's just fear wearing pearls. I wasn't afraid anymore. The moment was coming. The moment when the story they told themselves, the one where I was the reckless girl, the mistake maker, the black sheep, was going to fall apart. Wyatt didn't know all the ugliness. I never wanted him to. But he knew enough. Enough to know the truth had been twisted. Enough to know that standing up for me was also standing up for himself. So we waited. We laughed when it made sense to laugh. We played a few rounds of Uno, someone opened a second bottle of wine. And right as the conversation dipped into that uncomfortable silence that happens when everyone's run out of small talk, that's when Uncle Hank looked at Wyatt, squinted, and said it. "That kid looks nothing like your ex, or anyone we'd claim in this family." Then came Lana's laugh, the snide remark, the room bracing for my reaction, but I didn't flinch. Wyatt stood up. "Mom said to wait until everyone was here," he said, calm as anything. "Ready? I brought a video." And just like that, everything began to shift. The second Wyatt said he brought a video, the room went still. Uncle Hank leaned forward, beer can dangling in his hand. "A video," he repeated, his voice already thick with doubt. "Of what, Fortnite highlights?" Lana snorted. "Please don't say it's another one of those 'I love my mom' videos. We're trying to play Scrabble, not cry." Wyatt didn't flinch. He didn't even look at them. He walked over to the TV with that little drive he gets when he's focused, like when he's building a Lego set or trying to beat a hard level in a game. Calm. Steady. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a USB stick, and held it up. "This one's not about Fortnite," he said. "It's about me, and Mom, and the truth." A few awkward laughs bubbled up. My mom offered a nervous, "Now hold on, what's all this?" But no one stopped him. Maybe they didn't think he was serious, or maybe they were just curious enough to let it play out. Curiosity is stronger than cruelty sometimes, at least until the truth hits. I sat there watching Wyatt hook the drive into the side of the TV. My heart was thudding, but not from fear, from clarity. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what was about to happen, and I didn't regret any of it. Because here's the thing they never understood. I never stayed quiet because I was guilty. I stayed quiet because I was exhausted, because I knew that no explanation would satisfy people who had already decided I was a liar. Let me tell you what actually happened. I married Caleb when I was 23. He was charming, ambitious, came from a picture-perfect family that loved him and worshipped the ground he walked on. My family thought I'd scored the American dream. They adored him. Hank especially. He called Caleb the only decent man in the bunch. What they didn't know, what I didn't even fully know at first, was that Caleb had secrets, affairs, lies layered over lies. He'd disappear for weekends with excuses that didn't make sense. He'd pick fights just to leave the house. And when I finally confronted him, when I told him I knew, he did what cowards do. He flipped it on me. He accused me of cheating, said Wyatt didn't look like him, said he had no reason to believe that child was his. Then he left. He never once came to a doctor's appointment after that, never asked about the baby, and when Wyatt was born, he refused to see him, refused a paternity test, told my parents he'd been tricked, and they believed him, especially Hank, especially Lana. They took his word and ran with it, passing it around like a football, turning my name into a joke. Jenna doesn't even know who the dad is. She's just bitter because Caleb left. Wouldn't be the first woman to trap a man with a baby. I heard it all. Not always directly, but it got back to me. Gossip always does. But I knew the truth. I knew exactly who Wyatt's father was. And eventually, when Caleb cooled down enough to talk, he agreed to a paternity test, quietly. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. When the results came back, there it was, in black and white. Caleb James Whitaker, 99.98% probability of paternity. I saved it. For Wyatt. For this moment. Back in the living room, the TV screen lit up with Wyatt's homemade title card. This is the truth. Lana muttered, "Is this really happening?" Uncle Hank crossed his arms and scoffed. "Come on now, what's he think he's doing?" Wyatt turned to face the room, standing tall. For years, people in this family talked about me, about my mom. They said stuff like I didn't belong or that my mom was lying. So, I just want to say something before the video plays. He took a breath. My mom didn't lie. But she also didn't fight back. Because she didn't want me to grow up hearing ugly things about my dad. She didn't want to hurt anyone, but you all did that for her. Now even my mom was silent, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Wyatt clicked the remote. The video started, and I sat there, back straight, watching the people who once treated me like a disgrace suddenly brace themselves for a truth they never expected. This was the moment we'd waited for, the moment everything began to unravel. Wyatt stood in front of the TV with the remote in his hand, his back straight, his voice clear. It was strange watching my 10-year-old command a room full of adults, some drunk on beer, some drunk on their own self-righteousness. But there he was, solid, focused. I was the only one who wasn't surprised. He looked at me once more, just for a second. I gave him the smallest nod. He pressed play. It had taken us weeks to get that video right. Wyatt wanted to tell the story himself, but he also wanted it to be more than just words. He wanted them to see the truth. He said, "If they don't believe you, maybe they'll believe the paper." So we built it together. The first clip on the screen was me, sitting on our couch, holding a stack of papers, DNA results, legal filings, old photos. The camera was shaky. Wyatt had recorded it himself. I started simply. "Hi, if you're watching this, I'm guessing things have already gotten awkward." Good. That means it's the right time. There was a nervous ripple across the room. No one was used to hearing me speak like that, firm, direct, unapologetic. But I was done explaining myself with half steps. For 10 years, I've listened to the whispers. I've smiled through the jabs, the raised eyebrows, the comments that weren't really jokes. I never said much, because I thought being quiet made me strong, because I didn't want to raise Wyatt in bitterness. But silence doesn't protect anyone if it lets lies grow louder. The screen cut to an image of a DNA test. My name, Caleb's name, and a bolded line. 99.98% probability of paternity. You could hear the air shift. I glanced around the room. Uncle Hank was squinting at the screen like it was lying to him. Lana had gone pale. My mom reached for her wine glass, but her hand trembled just enough to knock it against the coaster. "Caleb is Wyatt's father," I said in the video. He knew it, I knew it. The only people who didn't want to know were the ones who preferred gossip to facts. Then, the screen faded into a short home video clip, an old one from years ago buried in my files. Caleb had come by one day, unannounced, during one of his guilt spirals. He was sitting on my porch, holding a coffee. I had recorded him on my phone without him noticing at first. In the clip, he said, "I know why it's mine. I just didn't want to face everyone after what I did to you. It was easier to let them hate you than admit I screwed everything up." I'd never shown that to anyone. Not because I didn't want to clear my name, but because I didn't want Wyatt growing up thinking his father was a coward. But Wyatt insisted. "He said it, Mom. He let them trash you. He could have fixed it and didn't." The video cut back to Wyatt, sitting in his room in front of the camera. He looked straight into the lens. "I love my mom, and I love my family, but I don't like how you treat her. I don't like how you treat me. I've heard things I shouldn't have to hear." I didn't make this video to embarrass anyone. I made it because the truth matters. I'm not a mystery. I'm not a mistake. I'm a kid who deserves respect. The screen faded to black. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Wyatt turned to face the room. "That's all." He walked back to the couch and sat down next to me like he'd just presented a school project. Calm, collected, but I could feel the energy vibrating off of him. No one moved. For a long moment, no one even looked at each other, just the quiet hum of the TV input screen behind us. Then Uncle Hank cleared his throat, shifted in his seat like he'd just realized how heavy he was. "Well," he muttered, "that was dramatic." Lana opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at her phone like she suddenly had somewhere else to be. "And my mom?" She set down her wine and looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not pitiful, not patronizing, just human. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," I said, and I meant it. Because for all their cruelty, what hurt most wasn't what they said. It was how easy it was for them to believe it. But now, there was nothing left to believe. The truth was, in their living room, wearing a blue hoodie and holding my hand, Wyatt had told our story, and I'd let him, because he was right. The truth matters. The silence after the video ended was almost unbearable. Not loud, not hostile, just stunned. It was the kind of silence that doesn't ask questions because it's already heard the answers. The kind of silence that doesn't come from lack of words, just shame. Wyatt sat beside me, still holding the remote, his shoulders slightly hunched like he was bracing for something to come flying back at him. I reached over and took his hand. "You did great," I whispered. He didn't smile. Not yet. He just nodded and kept looking forward. Across from us, Uncle Hank shifted again in his chair. He scratched at the label on his beer can, now empty. His usual bravado, the loud, red-blooded certainty he wore like armor, was gone. Finally, he let out a half chuckle, the kind meant to brush off guilt like dust. "Well, kid's got some editing skills," he said, gesturing toward the TV. "Could have used a little music, though." I raised my eyes to meet his, and this time I didn't look away. "You don't get to joke right now." That stopped him. He blinked, surprised by the firmness in my voice. Not because it was mean. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't dramatic. I was just done. "This wasn't a performance," I said. "It was a correction of years of damage. Damage that you helped create." My mom sat quietly beside the coffee table, wringing a napkin in her hands. For once, she didn't try to smooth things over. No placating smiles, no nervous laughter. She just looked between me and Wyatt and said softly, "I didn't realize how much this was still hurting you." Wyatt turned to her, and his voice when he spoke was gentle, but steady. It hurt because I didn't understand what I did wrong. I thought maybe I really wasn't part of this family. Like, maybe something was wrong with me. That shattered something in the room. It wasn't just what he said, it was how honest it was, how impossible it was to deny. Lana, sitting beside her dad with her arms folded, finally broke the silence on their side. She let out a scoff, but there was no confidence in it anymore. "Okay, fine. You made your point. Airing it all out like this, in front of everyone, that's a lot. You really think this is how grown-ups handle things? Wyatt looked at her with wide eyes. Sad, not angry. I thought grown-ups don't bully 10-year-olds, he said. I thought grown-ups protect people. That shut her up faster than anything I could have said. My dad, who'd been silent the entire night, slowly stood up from his recliner. At 70, his movements are slower, stiffer, but his presence still commands attention when he wants it to. He walked over to Wyatt and bent slightly, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You're a brave boy," he said. His voice was gravelly, tired but warm. Takes guts to tell the truth when people don't want to hear it. Wyatt looked up at him and smiled, just barely. And my dad looked over at me next. "I'm sorry, Jenna. I should have asked questions. I should have listened better." I didn't expect that. Not from him. For years, he'd been quiet on the matter, and part of me always assumed that meant agreement. But now I saw it differently. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just regret that had never found the right words. "I appreciate it," I said, and I meant it. As people slowly started moving again, grabbing jackets, clearing plates, the mood shifted. No big explosion, no dramatic walkouts, just quiet. Some were uncomfortable, some were unsure how to look at me. But no one made another joke. They couldn't. Wyatt had changed the room. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He didn't fight back the way they expected. He told the truth and stood in it. And somehow that was louder than any argument I'd ever had with this family. And the video, it wasn't just proof. It was grace. Because even with the facts in hand, we didn't shame Caleb. We didn't call names. We just told the truth. And that's what made it hit harder. As we packed up to leave, Wyatt tugged at my sleeve. "Was it okay?" he asked. "Did it work?" I knelt beside him and pulled him into a hug. It wasn't about working. It was about showing up. And you did that, baby. You did that better than any grown-up I've ever known. He grinned. Really grinned this time. As we walked to the car, the night air hit cool and clean. It felt lighter somehow, like we'd shed something heavy. And even though I knew we couldn't undo the past, one thing was certain. Wyatt had reclaimed his place, and I had reclaimed my voice. When Wyatt and I stepped outside that night, the porch light cast a golden glow across the driveway. The wind carried the faint scent of cut grass and distant bonfires. It was the kind of night that might have felt peaceful under different circumstances. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy walking away from that house. I felt free. Wyatt climbed into the passenger seat and buckled up, his fingers tapping nervously against his jeans. I slid into the driver's side and looked over at him. His face was flushed from all the attention, but there was a calm under his nerves, like he knew exactly what he'd just done, and why it mattered. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. I thought I was going to be scared, but once I started talking, I wasn't. "That's because you weren't lying," I said. "You were just saying what they needed to hear." He didn't answer right away, just looked out the window for a moment, then said, "Do you think they'll stop saying stuff now?" It was a fair question, a heartbreaking one, too. I took a breath. "Maybe. Some of them will. Some probably won't. But you know what matters?" "What?" "You don't have to carry any of it anymore. Not the questions, not the looks, not the blame. You handed them the truth. Whether they accept it is up to them now." Wyatt gave a slow smile. That kind of deep soul-level smile only kids who've been holding their breath for too long can make. We drove home in near silence. The radio played something soft, but I barely heard it. My mind was replaying everything. The looks on their faces, the weight of years lifting, the sound of my son telling a room full of adults, "I deserve respect." It felt surreal, like somehow we'd stepped out of survival mode and into something whole. And I realized, finally, that my silence all these years hadn't been weakness. It had been strategy, a way to survive, a way to protect my son from being dragged into adult bitterness and insecurity before he was ready. But now he was ready, and that changed everything. The following week, something strange started happening. A text from my cousin Heather, quiet, not involved in the drama, just said, "That was powerful. You did the right thing." A card showed up in the mail from my Aunt Marie, apologizing for not speaking up when it mattered. Even my mom called me, just called, not to talk about dinner plans or her church group or how the weather was finally normal again. She called to say, "I watched the video again, twice. You raised a remarkable boy." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just thanked her. Because there's something peaceful about getting validation after you no longer need it. And as for Uncle Hank and Lana, nothing. No calls, no texts, just silence. But for once, that silence didn't bother me. They could sit with their discomfort. They could sit with the proof. I was done shrinking to make them comfortable. A few nights later, Wyatt came into the kitchen while I was folding laundry and asked, "Can we go to game night next month?" I paused. "You want to go back?" He nodded. "I don't think they'll say anything again, and even if they do, it won't matter now. I feel like we already won." That moment hit me harder than the video ever could. Because there he was, 10 years old and already understanding something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You don't win by yelling louder. You win by living free. So yes, we'll go back. Not to prove anything, not to gloat, just to be present, because we belong there. And they know it now. The truth has a way of settling into places even shame can't uproot. And Wyatt? He'll grow up knowing that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks into a room full of doubters, presses play, and lets the truth speak for itself. I used to think silence was strength, that keeping my head down meant keeping my dignity. But now I know, silence is just the space between the lie and the truth. And when the moment comes, when you're finally ready, the truth doesn't just set you free, it sets everything straight. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been judged unfairly or stayed silent just to keep the peace, I hope this reminded you of one thing. Your truth is still your power, even if it takes years to share it. And sometimes the quietest voices carry the biggest truths. If you felt something while watching this, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your story too. And if you want more real stories that hit deep and speak truth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment like this. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.